The Law of One, Book 5, Fragment 53, Session 103, June 10th, 1983. Jim. The information in Session 103 concerns the continued spasming condition of Carla's abdominal region. Large amounts of pain accompanied the spasming and caused her to be less and less able to function in any manner of service at all. Thus, she felt useless, and her natural joy became reduced and was the focus for this series of questions. Further, Carla had decided to stop buying clothes for a year because she felt that she had devoted too much time and attention to a transient part of her life, and wished to break that habit, and this decision added to her loss of joy. Carla. By June of 1983, Don and Luther, our lessor and the owner of the house in which we had lived for all of the Ross sessions, were locked in a Mexican standoff because Luther raised the asking price an arbitrary $5,000 in the middle of negotiations, and because Don was absolute in his refusal to buy the house without Luther's adhering to his original price. All bets were off. At this point, I was just trying to get Don's deposit out of escrow. Luther would not release it after we agreed not to buy the house. He felt it should be his, regardless. Luther was not a great help. Eventually, I was to agree, long after Don's death, to give him over half the escrow amount. It really didn't seem to matter what was fair. There was more confusion because our lawyer for the purchase of the house did not do his paperwork. I did not want to go to court, feeling that Don would not have done so. Nothing would resolve. Everything felt like we were moving in molasses. This was the sort of baffling energy that seemed to have overtaken us. Nothing seemed to work well, me included. Don was feeling poorly too, though in a vague and generalized way rather than anything acute. Jim alone was regaining health every day. I was concerned about Don without knowing why, really. At this stage of his mental illness, it was very subtle. He simply felt very low and was very prone to think and plan for the worst-case scenario. While he, all his life, was always rigorously careful and cautious in his dealings, a change of address was in order, and his normal response was not this slow. We had to move. But month by month, looking constantly both here and in Atlanta, we could find nothing that Don was pleased with. I would target this point as the time period within which I was becoming aware that something was really wrong. As was always our pattern, I responded to the feelings of concern by asking for help and communicating. Don responded to the same with an increase of reserve. He could be firm about only one thing, that nothing we were looking at was the right place. In this atmosphere, we were all uneasy, unsettled. I tend to get busy when I get worried. I was busy. All the records were in order. I went on my walks and did my time in the whirlpool and tried to remain hopeful. I felt constantly a bit irritated with Don because I could never figure out why he rejected every single house we found in the listings or saw from the street. He seemed to be dragging his feet for no reason. Don was never one to share in his motives for doing things. He just said no, much as Nancy Reagan suggested later. It wasn't a solution for either environment. This is the first place I can think back and say, here I was feeling both of us losing ground, Don and myself. I was heavily dependent upon him. I had been raised a most independent person, and I had learned to let go of everything except what Don needed from me. And Don had needed all my choices to be made around him. He wanted me to be at home and right there, a person he could count on to be loving and willing to do whatever he decided. He never really consulted me, and it sounds very chauvinistic, but he did not mean this personally. He simply consulted no one. He never had. And his view on women was so bad that I could only look better. I quickly formed the opinion that when I stopped getting interference for an idea, that idea was the right one. It took me at least the first 6 years of our relationship to figure out that no matter what, I should never take a job that took me away from him, even as far as my desk. He even stopped me from working on our projects many times when he was at home. When I am off, you are off, he would say. So I had pretty much given over my decisions to him. It is to be noted that I was aware of the unhealthy tinge of this relationship. However, it was and remains my opinion that this was the absolute best Don could do in the way of having a relationship, and that was good enough for me. Where Don was concerned, I was ready to do whatever he needed, period. And at this point, with my health compromised and aiming for more sessions, I was not allowed to do much except follow my regimen and keep my weight above 80. I was wholeheartedly into this model for living, for what mattered most to me from the first was to see Donald really happy, as only the contact with Ra made him. So our every effort was towards that goal, just to have one more session. However, what had always before gone hand in hand with my dependency was his willingness to steer our course, indeed, his insistence upon that. I was glad to give this leadership over to him, and to do what he said. He was far wiser than I was or ever could be. When he stopped giving orders, and indeed seemed not to know what to do, I was quite lost. My mode was to find out what he wanted and to do it. But with the question of moving, we entered an arena where I could not succeed. No house, no apartment was acceptable. I do not find it at all odd that I had lost my joy. I was totally bewildered. My sense of reality had been compromised. The comments about clothing address a facet of my personality of which I am not proud but do own. I absolutely love to wear a new dress or pair of socks or whatever else might catch my fancy. My childhood had been very low on pretty clothing, as our family finances were tight. My mother and I, when I was grown and her career as a psychologist had begun, had a standing date on Saturday for lunch and shopping, which we kept faithfully until her death in 1991. I would find wonderful things with her, as she was a champion shopper, looking through great masses of sales racks with the patience of an archaeologist, sifting for good labels and just the right bargain. To this day, when I can, I love to go bargain hunting and just thrilled to be able to wear something new. I kept my promise to myself and did not buy clothes for myself for a whole year. However, I cheated in that I bought things for Mama and she bought things for me. I kept the letter of the promise anyway. Session 103, June 10th, 1983. Questioner. The instrument asks the question why she lost her joy in the recent past. Could Ra comment on that? Ra. I am Ra. The instrument made a free will decision not to address the physical catalyst causing great pain by means of the allopathically prescribed chemical compound which the instrument was sure would be efficacious due to its reliance upon the suggestions of Ra. Thus, the catalyst was given in a more complete form. The outer service to others became nearly impossible, causing the entity to experience once again the choice of the martyr, that is, to put value in a fatal action and die, or to put value on consciousness of the creation of the one creator and thereby live. The instrument, through will, chose the latter path. However, the mind and mental emotional distortions did not give the support to this decision necessary to maintain the state of unity which this entity nominally experiences and has experienced since its incarnation's beginnings. Since this catalyst has been accepted, the work begun to remove distortions blocking indigo ray might well be continued apace. Questioner. Could Ra recommend work appropriate for removing indigo ray blockage? Ra. I am Ra. We cannot recommend for the general situation, for in each case the distortional vortex is unique. In this particular nexus, the more appropriate working is in the mental and mental-emotional powers of analysis and observation. When the strongest and least distorted complex is set in support, then the less strong portions of the complex shall be strengthened. This entity has long worked with this catalyst. However, this is the first occasion wherein the drugs to dull the pain that sharpens the catalyst have been refused. Questioner. Can Ra recommend anything that the instrument can do or that we can do to improve any of the energies of the instrument? Ra. I am Ra. This is previously covered material. We have outlined the path the instrument may take in thought. Questioner: I didn't mean to cover previously covered material. I was hoping to add to this anything that we could do to specifically focus on at this time, the best possible thing that we or the instrument could do to improve these energies, the salient activity. Ra: I am Ra. Before responding, we ask your vigilance during pain flares, as the channel is acceptable but is being distorted periodically by the severe physical distortions of the yellow ray chemical body of the instrument. Those salient items for the support group are praise and thanksgiving in harmony. These the group has accomplished with such a degree of acceptability that we cavil not at the harmony of the group. As to the instrument, the journey from worth in action to worth in essay is arduous. The entity has denied itself in order to be free of that which it calls addiction. This sort of martyrdom, and here we speak of the small but symbolically great sacrifice of the clothing, causes the entity to frame a selfhood in poorness, which feeds unworthiness, unless the poverty is seen to be true richness. In other words, good works for the wrong reasons cause confusion and distortion. We encourage the instrument to value itself and to see that its true requirements are valued by the self. We suggest contemplation of the true richness of being. The Law of One, Book 5, Fragment 54, Session 104, July 27th, 1983. Jim. Ra made a point in Session 104 that seems to us to be one of the central principles which govern our evolution through the third density. It was in reference to the amount of exercise which would be most appropriate for Carla when her body was near normal and when it was weakened by one distortion or another. Ra suggested that it should be exercised more when weakened by distortion because it is the way of distortion that in order to balance a distortion, one must accentuate it. In the next response, Ra refers to the use of gifts with which one has entered the incarnation as a kind of use it or lose it proposition. When Book 1 of the Law of One was being published by the Donning Company under the title of The Ra Material, we were asked to write an introduction. In one portion of that introduction, Carla was writing about the concept of reincarnation. When we got the galley proofs back from the Donning Company, we noticed that a sentence which we had not written had somehow appeared in what we had written. It was truly, subjectively interesting. Ra's eloquent closing was in response to a series of queries concerning our oldest cat, Gandalf, who was then going blind and losing weight, apparently in preparation for death. We have considered leaving this material out, once again, because it has little general application, but we have left it in because Ra's desire not to infringe upon our free will is notable and well illustrated here. Carla. When people try to improve their living habits, they always go for diet and exercise as being the first things to change. I think these changes have a mental and emotional benefit as well as a physical one, in that it feels as good for the mind as the body to be doing something when there is a concern. The concern for me, by all three of us, seemed never-ending. I don't watch soap operas. They move too slowly for me to keep an interest. But certainly at this point we were living in one. I was steadily losing weight, even eating more than I ever had. So the focus was on diet and exercise. I think we all felt better because we were trying to work on the problems actively. It did, however, seem to take up so much time. Much of the days seemed spent on maintenance. We all were stressed by the situation. I always have loved my childhood summers spent dancing at the Noise Rhythm Foundation's camp in Portland, Connecticut. It exists still today and is a wonderful place altogether, one I cannot recommend highly enough, for you can live in a tent, dance on a sprung wood floor to classical piano music in an open pavilion with greenswards and forest about in an absolutely unspoiled environment. The teachers still follow Florence Fleming Noise's original method of instruction, which posits that all things have their own rhythm, so one may dance a starfish or a star, a bear or a horse or a blade of grass. It teaches that all things are alive and that they are all one consciousness. It is very like the Isadora Duncan style of dancing, but with a much elevated philosophy driving the technique. You can be a beginner and still have a wonderful time. I certainly did, and I measured the exercises I was doing at that time with the yardstick of the dance. The walking came up short, but I was faithful and kept up with the routine. Jim usually was kind enough to walk with me, which motivated me greatly. I see here, for the first time, really, that Ra was echoing Don's request of me, which always was to take more time just to sit. I am an avid reader and have always loved to toss myself headlong into a romance or science fiction or fantasy novel. To this day, it is not unusual for me to read a book a day. If only the books were good literature, but no, I love to read just for fun and winkle away to Adventureland. As time has passed, I have more and more found the time to rest in silence, but still tend to read too much. The stomach problems were to plague me for some years, indeed still. But things were greatly aided in 1988, when my doctor finally figured out that my gallbladder was infected. Ever since 1982, they had been reading the picture of my gallbladder as showing some sludge, not an operable problem. However, in actuality, it was simply infected and not working at all. Until the sick organ was removed, I was to suffer greatly. And 4 years later, in 1992, I had the second cleansing operation when half my colon was removed. These days, I still deal with discomfort through the GI tract, but it is not beyond management, and most days I can do well and just put such aches and pains out of my mind. When the sessions were going on in 1983, however, I was in sorry shape. The stress of knowing things weren't right with Don was undoubtedly a factor here. One can note the way Ra moved fluidly between the psyche and the soma in working with illness. They linked the severity of the pain to work in consciousness, which I was pursuing as intensively as I could, but to slow avail. When one has felt unworthy for a long time, one is slow to learn the self-respect of the deep and lasting kind. I was embarking on a life lesson which was all about learning to be wise and live. Don was also embarking upon a journey, a much darker one. He was learning how to love completely and die. Meanwhile, our beloved cat Gandalf was getting old and creaky. How he loved us. He wanted only to be on us, or beside us, always. His devotion never let up, even when, in Georgia some months later, we had to lift him to the food and sandbox as he could no longer walk. He would move heaven and earth just to be with us, and I got in the habit of carrying him with me so he would not have to walk on his sore paws. It may seem like Donald spent a lot of time on this kitty, but you have to remember how much like a child such a special pet is. We had no children, being celibate, and he wasn't likely to sire a family. But we did have Gandalf and Fairchild. They meant a great deal to us, as our cats still do to Jim and me. Notice how the tuning started drifting as Don persisted in trying to get specific information from Ra. It is abuse of a well-tuned channel to ask for specific information, I think. And notice how Ra's suggestions for bettering a situation always began with rejoicing in, giving thanks for, and praising the situation, whatever it is. To Ra's way of thinking, when the attitude with which you met the moment was praise and thanksgiving, you'd best be prepared to meet it well. Simple advice, hard to follow, but worth it. Session 104, July 27th, 1983. Ra, I am Ra. We greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. We communicate now. Questioner, could you first please give me the condition of the instrument? Ra, I am Ra. The readings are somewhat less distorted towards physical bankruptcy and vital energy loss than at the previous asking. There is still considerable bias in these readings. Questioner, The instrument would like to know what is the optimum amount of aerobics, walking, and whirlpool exercises for the best condition at this time. Ra, I am Ra. We shall answer in two ways. Firstly, to speak to the general case, which pertains to this instrument in varying degree. Each form of exercise is well accomplished approximately 3 to 4 times per your week. The amount of exercise, all quantified as one sum, is approximately 1 hour per diurnal period. We now answer in a second way, distorted in this response to the duple conditions of yellow ray, physical difficulty, and mind complex distortion. The swirling waters then must needs be viewed as being appropriate 4 to 5 of your times per week. The walking and the exercising as much as is desired by the entity. The total of all of these should in no case exceed 90 minutes per diurnal period. The yellow ray physical body has been experiencing that which is called lupoid changes in much tissue of muscle and some of the organs as well. The exercise regains the wasting physical muscular strength. In some ways, the walking is the more appropriate exercise due to the proximity of the entity to second density creatures, particularly your trees. However, the habitation you enjoy does not offer such opportunity, and instead offers the proximity to creations of mind, body, spirit complexes. This does not feed the mental, emotional needs of this entity, although it produces the same physical result. The exercise fulfills more of the mental, emotional need due to the entity's fondness for rhythmic expressions of the body, such as those found in athletic endeavors derivative of the artifact system which is known among your peoples as the dance. We suggest the support group encourage any exercise except that which exceeds the time limit, which is already far beyond the physical limitations of this body complex. It is the way of distortion that in order to balance a distortion, one must accentuate it. Thusly, the overwearing of the body may, if correctly motivated, produce a lack of deficit at which juncture the lesser exercise limitations should be put into practice. Questioner: the instrument has determined that the unwise use of her will is its use without the joy and faith components and constitutes martyrdom. Would Ra comment on that, please? Ra, I am Ra. We are pleased that the entity has pondered that which has been given. We would comment as follows. It is salubrious for the instrument to have knowledge which is less distorted towards martyrdom and which is rich in promise. The entity which is strong to think shall either be strong to act, or that which it has shall be removed. Thus, manifestation of knowledge is an area to be examined by the instrument. We would further note that balancing which, in this entity's case, is best accomplished in analysis and manifestation seated with the contemplation of silence, may be strengthened by manifested silence and lack of routine activity. We may go no further than this recommendation of regularized leisure, and desire that the entity discover the fundamental truths of these distortions as it will. Questioner: is there anything further that we can do to help the instrument's stomach and back spasming problem? Ra, I am Ra. The greatest aid is already being given to the fullest. The encouragement of the instrument to refrain from the oil-fried nature of foodstuffs in its intake is helpful. Cheerful harmony is helpful. The spasms must subside as a function of the entity's indigo ray work and, to some extent, the recommendations made in response to a previous query. The definitive refraining from overstepping the already swollen boundaries of physical limitation is recommended. The infection remains and the symptoms are now far less medicable, the entity having chosen the catalyst. Questioner: can you tell us what is wrong with our cat's, Gandalf's, eyes? Ra, I am Ra. The one known as Gandalf nears the end of its incarnation. Its eyesight dims and the aqueous membrane becomes tough. This is not a comfortable circumstance, but it is one which causes the entity no true discomfort. Questioner: is there anything that we can do to alleviate this situation? Ra. I am Ra. There is a course of therapy which would aid the situation. However, we do not recommend it as the condition is more benign than the treatment. Questioner. I don't understand. Could you explain what you meant? Ra. I am Ra. A doctor of the allopathic tradition would give you the drops for the eyes. The cat would find the experience of being confined while the drops were given more distorted than the discomfort it now feels, but is able to largely ignore. Questioner. Can the cat see at all? Ra. I am Ra. Yes. Questioner. Does it seem that the cat will lose all of its vision in the very near future, or is the cat very near death? Ra. I am Ra. The one known as Gandalf will not lose eyesight or life on the most probability vortices for 3 of your seasons, approximately. Questioner. I feel very bad about the condition of the cat and really would like to help it. Can Ra suggest anything that we can do to help out Gandalf? Ra. I am Ra. Yes. Questioner. What would that be? Ra. I am Ra. Firstly, we would suggest that probability vortices include those in which the entity known as Gandalf has a lengthier incarnation. Secondly, we would suggest that this entity goes to a graduation if it desires. Otherwise, it may choose to reincarnate to be with those companions it has loved. Thirdly, the entity known to you as Betty has the means of making the entity more distorted towards discomfort. Questioner. Could you tell me who you mean by Betty? I'm not sure that I know who you mean by Betty, and what Betty would do. Ra. I am Ra. The one known as Carla has this information. Questioner. I'm concerned about the possibility of moving. If we did move, it would make it very difficult for Gandalf to find his way around a new place if he can't see. Does he see enough to be able to find his way around a new environment? Ra. I am Ra. The vision is less than adequate, but is nearly accommodated by a keen sense of smell and of hearing. The companions and the furnishings being familiar, a new milieu would be reasonably expected to be satisfactorily acceptable within a short period of your space-time. Questioner. Could we administer the drops that you spoke of that would help his eyesight so that he wouldn't be confined? Is there any way we could do that? Ra. I am Ra. It is unlikely. Questioner. There's nothing that we can do? Is there any other possibility of using any techniques to help his eyesight? Ra. I am Ra. No. Questioner. Is this loss of eyesight? What is the metaphysical reason for the loss of eyesight? What brought it about? Ra. I am Ra. In this case, the metaphysical component is tiny. This is the condign catalyst of old age. Questioner. With the drops that you spoke of that would aid the eyesight, how much would they aid the eyesight if they were administered? Ra. I am Ra. Over a period of applications, the eyesight would improve somewhat, perhaps 20, perhaps 30%. The eye region would feel less tight. Balanced against this is rapidly increasing stiffness of motion, so that the holding in a still position is necessarily quite uncomfortable. Questioner. Then Ra thinks that the benefit derived from these drops would not be worth the cat's discomfort. This would probably... Is there any way that the cat could be given anesthetic and then the drops put into the eyes so the cat was not aware of them? Ra. I am Ra. The harm done by putting the allopathic anesthetic into the body complex of this harvestable entity far overshadows the stillness accruing therefrom, which would allow administration of medicaments. Questioner. I'm sorry to belabor this subject so much, but I was really hoping to come up with something to help Gandalf. I assume then that Ra has suggested that we leave things as they are. How many applications of drops would be necessary to get some help for the eyes, roughly? Ra. Approximately 40 to 60. Questioner. Each day, or something like that? Ra. I am Ra. Please expel breath over this instrument's breast. Note, this was done as directed. Questioner. Is that satisfactory? Ra. I am Ra. Yes. Questioner. I had asked if the drops should be administered once per diurnal period. Is that correct? Ra. I am Ra. This depends upon the allopathic physician from whom you receive them. Questioner. What is the name of the drops? Ra. I am Ra. We have a difficulty. Therefore, we shall refrain from answering this query. Questioner. I'm sorry to belabor this point. I'm very concerned about the cat, and I understand that Ra recommends that we do not use the drops, and we won't. I just wanted to know what it was that we weren't doing that would help the eyesight, and I apologize for belaboring this point. I'll close just by asking Ra if there is any further recommendation that he could make with respect to this cat. Ra. I am Ra. Rejoice in its companionship. Questioner. When we got our introduction back from our publisher on the book, which originally was called The Law of One, in the introduction, Carla had been speaking on reincarnation, and there was this sentence added: For although originally part of Jesus' teachings, they were censored from all subsequent editions by the Empress. Would Ra please comment on the source of that being placed in our introduction? Ra. I am Ra. This follows the way of subjectively interesting happenings, conditions, circumstances, or coincidences. We would suggest one more full query at this time. Questioner. Prior to the veiling process, there was, I am assuming, no archetypical plan for the evolutionary process. It was totally left up to the free will of the mind, body, spirits to evolve in any way that they desired. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. No. I am Ra. We leave you in appreciation of the circumstances of the great illusion in which you now choose to play the pipe and timbrel and move in rhythm. We are also players upon a stage. The stage changes. The acts ring down. The lights come up once again. And throughout the grand illusion and the following, there is the undergirding majesty of the one infinite creator. All is well. Nothing is lost. Go forth rejoicing in the love and the light, the peace and the power of the one infinite creator. I am Ra, Adonai.